here today with James Spackman, who has worked in books since his eye-catching 96 debut in the post-stream of Bloomsbury Publishing. How refined. From there, he moved on to sales, marketing, and management roles for Hachette and Osprey. Currently, he combines his work as an agent at the BKS agency. I don't know if that's how you say it. Books agency, BKS?
BKS.
BKS, brilliant, there you go. With coaching publishers in presentation skills as the book pitch doctor. And he's the author of How to Pitch a Book. So first of all, welcome to the podcast, James. It's fantastic to have you here.
Thanks, Alison. It's great to be here.
Really good to see you. And I know you from your IPG work as well. You've done some terrific work for the IPG Skills Hub, which has been really, really great. So let's start with that kind of premise behind the book. And I was really taken by a phrase in the book, which is that you say publishing isn't a meritocracy of texts, it's a business of persuasion, which is awful, isn't it? You don't want it to be that way, but it is. And it really rung true to me. So just tell me a little bit more about that premise.
Yeah, thank you. It's a phrase I find myself using quite a lot, and quite often with authors, actually. I quite regularly teach a course with the Arvon Foundation, and it's something that I find myself talking about with those students because they're writers who really want fair treatment. They want to do a good job, and for that to be recognized with being published and being and selling well. But I think the harsh truth is that there's so many factors which are beyond the control of the author and sometimes beyond the control of the publisher, and it really isn't a meritocracy. And even if it was, who'd be in charge? Who'd be judging? We have to. It's a commercial business. We have to let the market decide, and the market includes readers. And it includes retailers and media and all the rest of it. So, yeah, I think I suppose it's just a way of reminding ourselves that we need to be a bit pragmatic about it, but hopefully not lose all hope because, we can do a good job ourselves and give our books the best chance too.
And you've got sort of layers here, haven't you, of target reader? Because in the old days, a publisher's job was to pitch the book to the trade, to the booksellers, who would then, if they liked it, display it and so on, and you might get it on Radio 4, and that's how it used to work. In a sense, we have a slightly more level playing field now because you can go direct to consumer, and Amazon has opened that up. But there's such a slew of stuff out there that any kind of benefit of that almost feels like it's been wiped out. So tell me, when you're writing, you're writing for publishers, I know, in a sense, but you're also writing for authors because they have that opportunity to go direct now, don't they?
Yeah, I mean, my primary audience for the book is publishers, and my primary audience, obviously, for the workshops I do as the book pitch doctor is publishers. But I'm keenly aware that a lot of the stuff in this is relevant to authors because sometimes they do go direct, but also they are part of a kind of a chain. I talk about pitching is publishing, and the reason for that is that it's absolutely not something which is very easy to do successly just as an individual. I mean, yes, you can self-publish successfully, but the conventional model requires the author and the agent and the editor to be in a kind of a chain of enthusiasm where the way they talk about the book and the way they frame the book, they can not only persuade their, say, sales colleagues, but they can also give their sales colleagues something that they can take on to the retailers. And, eventually this stuff, goes all the way down to the readers. And I was talking with an industry friend, Helen Garnons-Williams, who I'm sure you know. She was talking about a book of hers, and in fact, this was also the Arvon thing, where she was able to show that there'd been a kind of a chain reaction of phraseology about a particular book of hers, where the phrase that the author had used had been adopted by the agent. She'd adopted it, and it morphed a little bit as it had gone through, but it's now on the back of the book, and it's probably part of the way that independent retailers and booksellers of all sorts recommend it to to members of the public, and indeed the way that people that readers recommend it to one another. It's almost like there's memes of recommendation, little verbal packages which you're passing down the chain, and that's why I think even if you're an editor, even if you're the shyest person in the world, even if you don't see yourself as a kind of shiny suited salesperson, you still need to kind of kick off this persuasive chain reaction and actually enlist people to the cause of your book, if that makes sense.
I love that phrase about a chain of enthusiasm. That makes complete sense to me. I
I
think
think
it'll
I
come
borrowed that from someone, and I can't remember.
no, it's all yours, James.
Stealing lines from other people, I'm afraid. But,
well, I'm going to credit it to you in this podcast notes, I'll tell you that. But I think that will come as a surprise to some authors who will see that their job is to pitch the book to a commissioning editor and won't be kind of aware of all the bodies that stand behind that commissioning editor. And I think it's also, I always think of a publisher as, or an editor particularly, as a sort of the ambassador for the reader. But actually, the editor is also the champion of the author when it comes to translating their ideas and igniting that enthusiasm in that whole book supply chain, isn't
it? Completely right, yeah. And I think it's a huge theme of mine is understanding your audience, and what a successful editor can do is understand what the author's trying to do, but also then translate that into language which will be relevant to their audience. And if their audience includes the publicity director and it includes the marketing person, they might find themselves framing it in quite specific insider-ish genre terms, like, it's becoming a common term now, but romantasy for a good 2 or 3 years, that would have been quite a niche term, and maybe authors might have been writing in that genre without even knowing it. Whereas then, the editor might use that expression in order to help their colleagues understand what category we're in. And they can maybe use quite pragmatic language about market share and positioning, and the author maybe wouldn't do it that way because they're a bit more kind of pure, in inverted commas. But yeah, it's just another example of having a really strong understanding of the mental agenda of the person you're talking to or the people that you're talking to, and saying things which are relevant to them.
A lot of this isn't, as you say, directly relevant to authors, but I love that point about that kind of meme that the author creates, the sort of the phrase that they come up with that then populates through that entire chain and becomes something that people immediately get. I mean, do you have any advice for authors on how to create that kind of level of copy, that sort of persuasiveness, that way of articulating what their book's about that's going to really stick with people?
I think only playful experimentation and practice, really. Try to get in the habit of talking to as many people as possible about it, and not just have a line and repeat it, but try to just have just half a second of thinking about what might be relevant to the person you're talking to, how you might explain it differently to them. And also, don't necessarily do it sort of in the same register, I suppose. I mean, because there are some settings in which you'll want to be talking about your own book in a way which is professional and industry-ish, and using categories and being quite kind of pragmatic about it. But then maybe there's other moments in which you actually might want to be a bit kind of looser about it. And I always think it's worth remembering that we all have different modes, don't we? Like when I started in the industry, I was very, very shy and inhibited socially in a professional setting, if you know what I mean. Like I was, famous for blushing in the office like all the time. But I did also know that I was the person in my social setting who was always recommending stuff, who's always enthusing about stuff. If we're, I always, when I do pitch doctor courses, I always tell people, remember that you've got your kind of Pret mode. Say you're queuing for coffee with a friend or a colleague, and somebody says, "Oh, what are you reading?" Because you're in publishing, and this applies to authors too, because you care about books, because you've got something to say, you'll find yourself enthusing about it in a really natural way. And remember that you have access to that mode, as well as potentially being able to talk about your book in a much more sort of sober, maybe commercial way as well.
How it stacks up against the competing titles and all that kind of objective analysis that you do.
Exactly.
But if you as the author are not passionate about your book, what chance has anybody else in that line got about that catching that enthusiasm?
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think you've got to have that passion. But as with a lot of things in books, I think it is a balance of the passion and the savvy, I suppose.
Which is why we love publishing, because it's that perfect blend. It's so idealistic, but it's also sort of crassly commercial, and we love that.
Yeah, completely. It's actually something I've heard Max Porter, author of Grief is the Thing with Feathers, the complete genius, he talked about that really interestingly as an author and a publishing person. And he always advises authors to sort of go easy on themselves in the sense that that dual consciousness of being completely pure with your art, and it is art, even if we're writing non-fiction about a practical subject, being totally pure about your practice, but also being completely savvy and street smart about the industry you're trying to get in. Yeah. It's not possible to be both things perfectly at once. And all you can do is try to be mindful about which headspace you're trying to occupy at any one time, and know that you've got to do a bit of both.
Yeah, and that phrase used about the register, finding the right register in the right situation, I think that's a really helpful way of looking at it. James, tell me more about the story behind the book, because obviously you have been doing this work for a long time. When did you go, I need to write a book about this? And then what decisions did you take about that?
It's been brewing an awfully long time, and I'll try not to give you the entire origin story, but it did. I can absolutely trace it back to being this very shy post-room boy at Bloomsbury, and being given the job as sales rep and having to go out there and talk to people about books, being quite inhibited about it at the start, but then realizing that actually I did relish that sort of way, that game of turning your enthusiasm about books and your commitment to books into persuasive messages that resonated for the people you were talking to. So there was that. And then when I was a sales director at Hodder and Stoughton, my boss at the time, Lucy Hale, asked me to help a couple of junior staff who were about to go into customer facing roles, to get them to get a bit more confident about doing that, because they had all the brains for it, they had all the commitment, they could write a great email about a book, but it's just the sort of performance aspect of it they struggled with. So we did a kind of role play, which I called Book Pitch Doctor, and it really helped. And so when I went freelance, I was actually itching to try that out on the open market. I started doing it with groups of people at Hachette, and then at PRH, and then at various indies and all sorts of others. And I think for quite a while I'd known that I wanted to put it into a book, because even though I'm not a kind of a writer, as it were, like I don't do it for self-expression, I'm not, like a poet or whatever. I do enjoy writing for a purpose, and to communicate ideas. And I enjoy my writing self, if that's not too wanky. It feels like a version of me that I like. And to answer the question properly, about 4 years ago, I decided to do it. And I was on holiday and I was just swimming, and I just started to kind of write it in my head, and it came pretty quickly and pretty easy. I actually really struggled then to kind of keep going with it, because my day job as an agent and a pitching coach, I would always find myself putting that stuff first, and it felt difficult to give myself permission to write. I would block out 2 hours and then find that I'd use 90 minutes of it replying to emails. I think, oh, geez, when am I going to make progress on this? But I was still enjoying it when I did give myself permission to write. I was still enjoying it enough that over about a year, I got together about a third of the book. It's only a short book, but I got about a third of it together. And then I decided to kind of go immersion on the rest of it. And I got the train to my wife's family have a small place on the coast in Scotland, and a really kind of quiet bit of Dumfriesshire. And I basically borrowed the house for a week, and I took the train up there with my bike, cycled from the train station, got some groceries on the way, and then basically stayed there for a week, doing this sort of rather monastic. It was amazing. And then it's the first, before the recording started, we were talking about parenting and stuff. And it occurred to me while I was there, it's the first time I've been alone and silent for a week. Not really deliberately, but because I wanted to immerse myself in the writing.
Bless them, they are real enemies of ambition, aren't they, kids?
But although I have to say, they've also been really supportive with the book, and reading bits of it and commenting on it. And actually, my daughter is a really good illustrator, and she did my chapter heading.
So lovely.
Yeah, and that to me, we can talk about this, but that's one of the massive satisfactions, I think, of being in charge of your own book. It's just doing what you want and just enjoying it yourself. But I finished it off then, and then kind of, maybe we'll come on to this, but I started to make decisions about what to do with it, because
talk me through the publishing strategy, because it's so interesting.
I started with lots of different options, and I deliberately didn't make any decisions about it until I'd actually finished a manuscript I was happy with, or at least happy enough with to send to a copy editor. I then had a day of chat very generously with my friend George Walkley, who some of your listeners will know. If you've even had him on the
he's coming on, actually. I think you'll be before him, though, but he's coming on. He's talking about AI, which is, he's just amazing. He knows about everything.
And funnily enough, he's working on a business book himself, but he can tell you about that. But he knows, in addition to knowing everything about AI, he also just knows everything about the business of publishing, and particularly self-publishing and audio and things like that. And he really generously helped me kind of strategize about this. And I think, I remember being quite unenthused about some of what felt like inevitable stuff, like putting it on Amazon, doing the metadata, the keywords and stuff, the pricing, the ebook, which I knew would be difficult to get perfect, the print on demand stuff, which felt inevitable, dealing with reviews and stuff like that. And it didn't feel quite right. And I was really grateful to George for reminding me that it was really important that every time I picked up the book, in order to do anything with it, send it to someone, give it to somebody, refer back to it, that I felt a sense of pride. And that really, that's wouldn't necessarily be the same for all authors. For some people, it's it's kind of pragmatic in a different way, and there's kind of commercial imperatives or sort of reach imperatives, which might mean that doing it in a particular way, maybe low price, or all digital or whatever, might work. But for me, making sure that I enjoyed every single step of the process and was really proud and happy with every element of the thing itself, actually that turned out to be the most important consideration. And so rather than do an ebook, rather than do it print on demand, I used, at his suggestion actually, Riverside Publishing Solutions, who I think for me were right in the sweet spot of doing affordable self-publishing solutions, but also being very human. So I had a personal contact there, Duncan, who I think is the owner of the business, who was incredibly responsive and patient. And he knew that I was in the business, and so I would have opinions about M-dashes and stuff like that. all that geeky business. But he helped me work through all that, and I couldn't have been happier with the result. And along the way, I made a point of asking friends to help. So there's a woman called Catherine Venn that I used to work with at Hodder. She was my copy editor. Claire Faulkner, who's online as Small Dots. She's used to be a colleague at Bloomsbury doing marketing. She's a graphic designer now, and she did the cover, which I absolutely love. I mentioned my daughter, and and just being able to kind of gather a little mini team to help with it, and just the irrespective of any outcome whatsoever, the process and the thing have made me very happy.
So, and it is, you're right, very different to most people's experience of almost losing control of their manuscript once it goes to a publisher.
Yeah.
But the outcome of that is that basically, if you want to buy the book, you buy it from you. It's just not out there in the supply chain. And I was really like, oh, that's a really interesting decision.
I know, and I still, and it's not necessarily forever. I sometimes feel like it's slightly perverse, but I do also quite like it, because not least because if somebody buys it from my website, I see their name, I see, and
got that direct relationship.
Yeah, so I handwrite a note to them, and I put it in with the book, and I stamp the envelope with a like a wood block which a guy in India made for me based on my logo, and it's very person to person. It's very quite artisanal, to use that slightly hackneyed word, but it's genuinely personal, and I really like that. In future, I mean, I don't know, like I've had a couple of people asking me about, do you want to translate it into French or Italian, and yeah, that might happen. And I haven't done an audio version of it, but I could do. And I think my feeling about it is doing it at my own pace and under my own control, not in a neurotic way, but just as this is something that I love, and I really care about how people receive it. But I care more about how they receive it than how many of them receive it. And I suppose the other element of this is that and then this will be very familiar to a lot of your listeners and guests, is that it integrates into a broader business strategy. So,
and in a sense, there'd be no point whatsoever in taking that strategy if you weren't connecting with people, if they didn't get to know about the book directly through you.
Exactly right, yeah. And so, if like next week I'm doing a workshop with people from Penguin Random House, and I bundle in a copy of the book for each of them to take home at the end of the course. That's lovely. I've sent out gratis copies to people, either who might recommend it to their staff, or who might think, oh, this is interesting. Use it as a calling card. Oh, this is interesting. We'll get this guy in to do some workshops with us, because it's laying out the methodology and the tone, actually, and it's making it very, very obviously book specific, which is it's obviously a key thing for me, that I'm not just a generic public speaking coach. It's about pitching books, so it makes that point pretty bloody obviously. So yeah, it just kind of works for my personal ecosystem.
It works for your target market because it's a relatively small target market, and you can reach them directly. So yeah, it makes complete sense. It's just such an interesting strategy, and genuinely never had anybody on whose strategy was not to be able to get their book into every channel absolutely possible. And it's just fascinating. I love it. There's so many different aspects to which you could take an approach to this question that I'm about to ask you. So I'm really fascinated where it's going to go. But I always ask my guests for their sort of one best tip for somebody who's just starting out on this journey. So I guess with your pitch doctor hat on and with your publisher hat on, I'm being greedy now, I know, but I don't even care. What would you want people to understand?
I think, I mean, I was going to actually say that you pass on that advice that George did to me about I suppose it's more broadly than just do something that you'll feel proud of, because that's not necessarily the number one thing for everybody, but be completely certain, really, really be clear with yourself about what success is, because it's quite easy to kind of plow ahead without really knowing that.
Yeah.
And I think, is it that you've made £1 million? If so, great. Is it the number one bestseller? That's a different thing, but also great. Is it getting it reviewed in The Economist or Spectator or whatever? Is it simply that everyone at your company gets to read it? But knowing almost like what the lowest bar is, not because you can't shoot higher than that, but at least knowing where success is going to start. When will you know that you've done well in your own terms and by your own standards? I think it's really hard to overestimate how important that is. And I suppose I would also like sneakily add in another thing, which is very much a pitch doctor maxim, which is think about the audience. Really, really understand who's in the bullseye of your audience, because it's very, very tempting. I know this as an agent and a publisher, and authors, I think, always struggle with this. Is you want to be able to say, well, yeah, everyone should be able to read this. This is relevant, and that's fine. But go through the mental process of zeroing in on who it is most appropriate for and right for them, and you sort of can't go too far wrong with that.
You have got a lovely sort of forbidden list on your website. Have you never, ever used these phrases? It's so helpful. We'll put the link on, don't worry, on the show notes. But yeah.
And they're all things I've done myself. So it's...
Well, that's nice to hear as well, actually. That's good, because I had looked at it and I thought, I'm sure I've written that in copy before. Never mind.
Oh, yeah.
Recommend us a book, will you, James? Not allowed to recommend your own.
No, okay. There's two. One is that The Perfect Pitch by John Steele. I'm assuming it's still in print. It's basically a massive rant about PowerPoint and how crap it is and how you shouldn't ever. It's worth it for that. And I've stolen so many lines from it, including your slides are not your presentation. You are your presentation, which I think is
that's
really
very good.
It's also got in the back a terrific case study of the London 2012 Olympic bid and how they beat Paris. Some people think it was a big bribe. I choose to believe that it was because their presentation was fantastic, and this is all about understanding your audience, because the Paris bid was all about Paris. The London bid was all about, we are going to inspire a generation of athletes.
Yeah, how interesting.
To the audience. So, and I won't go into it. I could talk for hours about that. I can't not also mention this as well, which is almost like the text version.
You have to say it for those listening.
Sorry, yes. Blurb Your Enthusiasm by Louise Wilder. So I aspire to being as good at verbal pitching as she is at blurb writing, because she's worked for Penguin for 25 years writing their cover copy, and she's absolutely fantastic at it, but also has written this wonderful book, which it's about cover copy, but it's about so much more about books and about how we write about books, how we recommend books. So it does actually thematically overlaps a lot with my work. But she's a brilliant writer, and one of the quietly most... God, that sounds really condescending. She's extremely clever and talented and accomplished at what she does. But I suppose partly because of just what her job is and what it isn't. Not that many people have heard of her. She's not like a attention seeker like me.
Well, she's you're not, but she's very much in the business of showing you other people, isn't it? That's sort of what she does. Yeah. I like to think that she had the title and then decided she had to write the book. Do you think it's such a great title?
I think she actually at the back she does this really clever thing where she gets 4 or 5 people and an AI to do an alternative blurb for her own book. It all gets a bit meta. There is something in there somewhere about the title. I think there's a chapter about titles, and she talks about the alternative one. So really, really getting under the hood of that kind of wordplay. But yeah, I agree. Blurb Your Enthusiasm is pretty much unimprovable.
It's unimprovable, and that's marvellous. James, if people want to find out more about you, more about your agency stuff, the Pitch Doctor stuff, where should they go? And particularly about the list of never do this, which is gold.
Well, bookpitchdoctor.com, that's where you can get the book. That's where you can find the band list. That's where you can find out about workshops that I do, online, offline, long, short, whatever. And the BKS agency, and I slightly wish we'd never called it that, because it's BKS because it's Bartholomew Killingly Spackman. So Jason Bartholomew, Jessica Killingly, James Spackman.
Yeah, that does make sense.
It works better than print. It's a curse, but yeah, we are the BKS agency. We're part of Midas, which is our parent company, and we're a very, very good literary agency.
Fabulous. James, thank you so much for your time today. It's been fascinating. It's been really interesting hearing the story behind the book. I'm hugely inspired by the purity of your vision for this. Let's just take it down a register. I just love the way you did what you wanted to do. I think that's absolutely fantastic and very, very inspiring. And there's been a huge amount of really, really valuable stuff there for the listeners as well. So thank you for your time.
Oh, thanks, Alison. It's been a joy.